Jungkook sat in the VIP section of his club, the Black Lotus, his piercing eyes scanning the crowd below. The dim lights flickered, the music thrummed through the walls, but he felt nothing. Another meaningless night, another business deal sealed with blood. Until she walked in. A woman in sleek black dress, her posture confident, her eyes filled with something Jungkook rarely saw in others. Defiance. His finger tightened around his glass. Who is she? She wasn't one of the regulars, not a socialite, not one of his enemies, yet she walked in like she belonged. Jungkook leaned forward, slightly intrigued. She's new. Taeyang, his right-hand man, murmured beside him, also watching her. Jungkook hummed in response, unable to tear his gaze away as she moved gracefully across the floor. Then, as if sensing his gaze, she turned her head and met his eye. For the first time in years, something inside Jungkook shifted. Vian's POV. When she locked eyes with him from across the club, a chill ran down her spine. His gaze was dangerous, intense, consuming. She took a deep breath, approached the bar, and ordered a drink. Vian had been trained for this to seduce, to manipulate. She knew everything about John Jungkook, the ruthless, untouchable mafia king who ruled the underground world. Her mission: make him fall for her and steal his most valuable documents. Simple, or so she thought. Jungkook watched her for a long moment before making his move. He walked up beside her, his presence overwhelming. Whiskey, he told the bartender, then to wine he smoked. First time here. She turned to him, raising an eyebrow. Why, do I look lost? His smoke widened. No, you look like trouble. Vine chuckled, sipping her rim. And what if I am? Jungkook's eyes darkened with intrigue. Then I might want to get in some trouble. Vine tilted her head. Good. He was taking the bait. She needed him to want her, to obsess over her. But what she didn't expect was how easily he pulled her into his world. Jungkook couldn't stop thinking about her. For the first time in years, someone occupied his mind. He found himself replaying the conversation, the way her lips curved when she smoked, the fire in her eyes when she challenged him. Who was she? Why did she feel different? A few nights later, he saw her again, this time at a high profile meetup where only the most powerful and dangerous people gathered. She wore a red dress, the color of danger, the color of temptation. The music slowed, lights dimmed, and the world seemed to hush as Jungkook's dark gaze settled on Van from across the ballroom. Jungkook had no patience for coincidences. The air shifted. His eyes didn't leave her as he walked forward with predatory calm, his voice low. Are you following me, Miss Trouble? Vine smiled. Would it be problem if I was? Jungkook leaned in, whispering against her ear. No, it would be challenge. And Jungkook never backed down from a challenge, holding out his hand, his voice low and rich, like silver over steel. Dance with me. Before she could respond, he took her hand and gently yet firmly pulled her into the dance floor. His arms snaked around her waist, tugging her flush against his chest. Her breath caught as she looked up at him, his piercing eyes reflecting something dark, something indescribable. There was no room between them. His hold was possessive, yet graceful, leading her with confident steps. As they moved, he caught a loose strand of her hair that had fallen across her face. Without a word, his finger brushed her cheek as he tucked the strand behind her ear with aching gentleness. Vian's heart thudded in her chest. The intensity in his eyes held her still, like a spell. She didn't realize she was leaning in, drawn to him by a magnetic pull she couldn't fight. But just when her lips were a breath away from his, Jungkook tilted his head and instant pressed a solo, deliberate kiss against the side of her neck. Soft, intimate, dangerous, and then he pulled back. Without a word, he walked away, leaving her in the middle of the dance floor, completely and utterly breathless. For the first time, she felt like she had lost control. Still dazed,
Van walked out into the night, trying to collect herself. The cold air hit her skin, but it did little to clear her spinning head. That's when she saw it, her car, a flat tire. Seriously, she muttered in frustration, kicking the ground softly. Trouble Angel, came a familiar voice. She turned to find Jungkook leaning against his sleek black car, hands in his pocket, watching her with the same infuriating smoke. I'm fine. He pushed off the car and walked towards her. Let me give you a ride. I don't need one, she said, folding her arms. Suit yourself, he said with a shrug, and already walking back to his car. She sighed. The night was long, cold, and she was in heels. Fine, just a ride. He opened the door for her with a mocking bow. Your chariot awaits. 10 minutes into the drive, just as Jungkook was teasing her about her stubbornness, the car lurched and came to a halt. It started with the rain. Thunder cracked through the sky as they sat in the car, twisting the key again and again, but the engine refused to start. Ryan cursed under her breath. Great, just great. Jungkook leaned back in his seat, one arm slung lazily over the back seat, watching her with quiet amusement. When you're frustrated, he said, voice smooth and low. Ryan glared at him. We are stuck in the middle of nowhere, and you're flirting. He smirked. I'm stating facts. He came to her side and opened the door for her again. His eyes sparkled with mischief. Fate's working overtime tonight. Jungkook tilted his head with a smoke, stepping closer. Ryan frustrated mutter. Did you plan all this? Would it scare you if I said yes? Her breath hitched, but she quickly looked away. You're insufferable. And yet, he whispered, you are still here. The rain began to fall again, first slowly, then in heavily rhythmic sheets. Ryan pulled her coat tighter, watching as Jungkook casually leaned against the hood of his car, completely unbothered by the storm. We should find shelter, she muttered. Already done. He looked at her with the maddening smoke. There's a hotel 10 minutes up the road. Van narrowed her eyes. You have been here before? He chuckled, voice dark and low. You'll be surprised how much I plan ahead. By the time they reached the hotel, the rain had soaked through their clothes. Van crossed her arms, visibly annoyed as the receptionist informed them. I'm sorry, sir. All rooms are currently booked except one. A suite with a single bed. She turned to Jungkook immediately. We'll find another hotel. Jungkook didn't even look at her. He slid his black card across the counter. We'll take it. Jungkook, she hissed under her breath. He turned to her slowly, eyes gleaming. I'm not letting you wander around. It's not safe. His voice dropped as he leaned back, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek. The room was warm, dimly lit, and way too intimate. A fireplace crackled gently at the side. Jungkook shrugged off his coat, revealing his soaked black shirt clinging to his frame. He changed in front of her without shame, his back muscles flexing as he peeled off his wet shirt. Ryan looked away, flustered. Jungkook noticed. You shy? He teased, stepping closer. I'm not, she lied. He leaned in, voice dripping. Then why can't you look at me? Ryan pushed past him and retreated towards the bed, but her heart was pounding. You can shower first, he said, throwing her a towel. Unless you prefer, I help. She glared at him, cheeks flushed. I'll manage. While she was in the bathroom, Jungkook stood by the window, watching the rain. Everything was going perfectly, he smoked to himself. When Ryan came out, hair damp, wearing the oversized robe provided by the hotel, Jungkook turned to her slowly, his eyes glittering. You look beautiful, he said simply, and with no teasing this time. She blinked, caught off guard. Thanks. They sat near the fire, both quiet. The tension was thick, like the air was holding its breath. Later that night, she curled up on the couch. The bed's big, enough for two. Cook said, his voice soft but commanding. Come sleep properly. I'm fine. He got off the bed, walked over, and crouched next to her. I'm not asking. With a sigh, she gave in and got into the bed. Jungkook turned off the lamp, but the room was still thick with tension. Weeks passed and Van's plan was working. Jungkook became possessive, protective, obsessed. He would show up at her apartment unannounced. He would take her to secret places only he knew. He told her things he never told anyone about his past, his scars, his loneliness. And when she was losing herself because behind the ruthless mafia king was a man who was capable of love. She wasn't supposed to fall, but when he kissed her, she knew she already had. Flashback. It was one of those grand formal gatherings, the kind with chandeliers hanging low and conversations flowing like the wine. Wine stood near the bar, casually sipping her drink, when a man approached, his smile charming, but his eyes far too bold. He leaned in, voice smooth. "You're here alone?" Before Wine could even react, a strong presence appeared by her side. "Jungkook, she's taken," he said coolly, his voice laced with warning. Wine blinked in surprise. "We are not." But Jungkook didn't let her finish. He slipped an arm around her waist and pulled her flush against him, his eyes sharp and dangerous. "Then leave the man." It wasn't just a look, it was a warning, a claim. His gaze pierced straight through the stranger, sending a chill down the man's spine. The man, clearly intimidated, gulped and took a hasty step back. "Sorry, I didn't know," he muttered before quickly disappearing into the crowd. Vine turned to Jungkook, brows raised. That was unnecessary, but Jungkook didn't reply. His gaze shifted to her, still dark and intense, possessive. Before she could say anything else, he cupped her face and kissed her, deeply, fiercely, like he'd been holding it in for far too long. As he pulled away, his lips hovered near hers. His voice dropped to a low whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "You're mine now." And just like that, they started dating. No labels, no question, just a silent understanding that from that moment on, they belonged to each other. And Vine didn't fight it. She let herself fall, slowly, painfully, into something she didn't understand. And Jungkook wrapped her into a world where love meant possession and obsession. Jungkook was lost in deep thoughts. For the past few days, he had noticed Van acting strangely, and it was starting to worry him. As Jungkook sat lost in thoughts, the young entered his cabin, his voice tone firm and direct. "You're losing focus." The young confronted him. Jungkook's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "She's dangerous," the young insisted. "Something about her doesn't add up." Jungkook's temper flared. "Watch your mouth, Taeyang." But the seed of doubt had already been planted. That night, Jungkook watched Vine sleep beside him, his fingers tracing her cheek. Was she hiding something? He didn't want to believe it. But his past had taught him one thing: trust no one. Time skipped to next day. Jungkook overheard the phone call. Van was talking on the call. "Yes, there is a file with that name on Jungkook's laptop," but his world began to crumble around him. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The person he had started to love the most, the one who had become his safe space, who felt like home, the one he had trusted with his deepest scars, had betrayed him. As Vine turned around and looked at the person, her hands turned cold. "Jungkook, I." Before she could complete, his voice was cold. "Who are you?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Please let me explain." He stepped back. "So it was all a lie." "No, I." "Don't lie to me, man." His voice cracked. Then he pulled out his gun. "Leave." She froze. When she didn't move, he turned the gun on himself. "If you don't live, I'll pull the trigger." A single tear slipped from down his cheek. Vine choked back a sob and ran. Jungkook was broken. Ever since the confrontation, something inside him had shattered. He hadn't been the same, not even close. His mind was a storm of confusion, questions spinning like plates in his head. His heart, once steady and sure, now felt unbearably heavy, dragged down by a pain he couldn't name, let alone escape. Ryan's betrayal, or what felt like betrayal, stayed in his mind like a shadow that followed him everywhere. He kept thinking about the way she had looked at him that night, the things she didn't say, and the things she might have done. Those thoughts filled his head like a poison he couldn't get rid of. He couldn't focus on work anymore. Everything felt too heavy. Sit at his desk, staring blankly at the screen as hours passed. Sleep never came, just long, restless nights of staring at the ceiling, thoughts clawing at his chest. His phone rang constantly, friends and colleagues reaching out, but he never answered. He stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped living. His once sharp, confident gaze had dulled. The spark that had made people stop and stare was gone. Now his eyes were vacant, mirror of the emptiness he had carried inside. People who passed him didn't recognize him. Maybe he didn't recognize himself either. He'd fallen into a void, and truth was, he didn't even know if he wanted to climb out. He was walking through a quiet alley, lost in his thoughts, when suddenly he was attacked. Someone hit him. He was blindfolded. His hands were tied. He couldn't see, couldn't move. There were no windows, no voices, except the one that came with pain. The ache in his muscles was constant, but worse was the ache in his chest, tight, suffocating. And then came the voice, low, cruel, deliberate. She was part of this. One of them whispered near his ears. Ryan knew she helped us. The words cut deeper than any blow they had landed. Jungkook froze. His breath caught in his throat. His heart stopped, then crashed against his rib like a hammer. He wanted to scream no. He wanted to believe there had been a mistake. But his mind betrayed him, pulling forth every memory of her, her laugh, her touch. The way she had whispered his name like it meant something. Was it all a lie? Did she really do this? That thought, just that single awful thought, broke him more than any chain or blade ever could. The physical pain was one thing, but the idea that Ryan, the only light he had left, had helped destroy him, that was unbearable. In that cold, dark room, with bruises on his skin and heartbreak in his soul, Jungkook realized the worst kind of torture wasn't what they did to his body, it was what they made him believe. The moment Ryan heard that Jungkook had been taken, something inside her snapped. She didn't wait for orders, she didn't ask for help, she didn't care about protocol or consequences. All she knew was that Jungkook was in danger, and she would burn the world down to bring him back. She stormed into her chief's mansion like a storm made flesh, her gun steady in her hand. Where is he? Her voice was like ice, sharp and deadly. The chief raised his hand slowly. Ryan, don't be foolish. Bang! The bullet slammed into the wall right beside his ear. Dust and plaster exploded behind him as he flinched back. Next time, she said coldly, I won't miss. Terrified, he gave her the address. She didn't waste a second. By the time she reached the abandoned warehouse, adrenaline was surging through her veins like fire. She kicked down the door and found him, bleeding, tied to a chair, barely conscious. Junk. She rushed to him, but his expression stopped her, cold. His eyes opened slowly, clouded with pain. Are you here to kill me? Her heart shattered, her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she lifted her gun and shot at the man behind him, who was about to strike. I'm here to save you, she said firmly, even as her voice crackled. She rushed to untie him, her hands shaking. Jungkook didn't resist, but his eyes remained distant. Then why? He whispered. Does it still hurt? She wanted to explain everything, to tell him that she had nothing to do with it, that she first had planned to get the documents, but after falling in love with him, all she had been trying is to protect. but there was no time. Before they could move, another figure appeared in the shadows, aiming straight at Vine. Bang! But the bullet never touched her. Jungkook had shot first. Without hesitation, he had pulled the trigger, and then he pulled her into his arms. His voice trembled as he held her close. I don't care about anything else. I just can't lose you. And in that moment, even surrounded by chaos, pain, and blood, they found each other again. After the chaos, the bloodshed, and the unspoken truths, Jungkook had and Ryan had made their relationship official. There were still scars, both visible and invisible, but in each other they had found something worth holding on to. That night, Vine lay fast asleep, her breathing soft and steady, her body curled beneath the warmth of their shared blanket. The moonlight spilled gently across the bed, illuminating her peaceful face. Jungkook lay beside her, silently watching her for a moment. His eyes traced the line of her face, the softness of her lashes, the slight curve of her lips. A small smile touched his own. Carefully, he slipped out from under the sheets, making sure not to wake her. Barefoot, he moved through the dimly lit room, his steps silent. Walked to the far end of the hallway, past a bookcase most assumed was just for a show. With a swift glance behind him, Jungkook reached for a hidden latch beneath the bottom shelf. Click! The shelf shifted, revealing a narrow, hidden door. Without hesitation, he stepped through and closed it behind him. The air inside was colder, quieter, the kind of silence that wrapped around you like a second skin. Jungkook stood alone in his dark office, a glass of whiskey cradled in his hand. The only source of light came from the soft amber glow of a desk lamp, casting long shadows across the room. The wall in front of him was completely covered. Hundreds of photos of Vian, pinned and neatly arranged, pictures of her, smiling, sleeping, working, laughing, and even crying. Moments he had collected, studied, memorized, like sacred scripture. He stepped closer and traced her face in one of the photos with the tip of his finger. She thought I didn't know. He murmured to himself, his voice cold and unreadable. Every encounter, every smile, every kiss, every lie. I knew everything from the start. He remembered the first time she stepped into his space, her soft voice, the way her eyes held a flicker of innocence that didn't quite reach her soul. She had tried to charm him, tried to play a game she thought she could win, but she had underestimated him. She didn't know she had stepped into the arms of a man who had already built a world where she was always his end game. He had watched her, studied her, learned every inch of her soul, and eventually he had tasted her, claimed her. He thought back to how he personally booked every single room in that hotel just so they'd have no option but to share one, just so she'd be closer, just so he could have that night. By hook or by crook, he whispered darkly, a smirk playing on his lips. You were always going to be mine. He lifted his glass in a silent toast to the woman who had turned his world upside down, yet never realized she'd already lost the game from the very beginning. She had no idea how far he was willing to go, to be near her, to keep her. Jungkook silently entered the room, and he placed his drink down and walked towards her, sitting beside her on the edge of the bed. His finger reached out, and with the back of his hand, he gently traced the curve of her cheek. She didn't steal. His expression softened, eyes lingering on her features as if trying to commit them to memory. So fragile, so fierce, so completely his. He leaned down and whispered against her ear, You'll never know how deep this goes.
Then he kissed her forehead softly, possessively, before lying down beside her, wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her close. Even in sleep, she unconsciously leaned into him, and that was enough for now. The end.
Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.